Imagine waking up one day to find that the life you've spent years chasing, the promotions, the relationships, the comforts, has led you to a strange emptiness. You sit in a crowded cafe surrounded by laughter, the hum of phones, the busy bustle of normal life, and yet something is missing. A gnawing emptiness, like an itch you can't quite scratch. You've been told time and time again that happiness is just within reach, that it's a matter of getting the right things, doing the right things, being the right kind of person. But now, in this moment of clarity, you realize the paradox. The harder you try to hold on to happiness, the further it slips away. What if the very idea of happiness, the one you've been told to seek your entire life, wasn't what you thought it was? What if society, your family, your education, and the media have been selling you a lie this whole time? What if the pursuit of happiness, in the way you've been taught to chase it, is actually the very thing keeping you from ever finding it? Now, you may feel a tightness in your chest, a discomfort at the thought. After all, isn't happiness the ultimate goal of life? Isn't that why we strive for success, for wealth, for love? And yet, despite all this striving, something inside you knows that it's not working. You can almost taste it, the fleeting, shallow joy that comes from a new possession or a compliment, but it vanishes faster than it came. It's like trying to fill a cup with water that keeps draining out no matter how much you pour in. No matter how much you achieve or how much you possess, it never feels like enough. Now ask yourself, why is it that with all the comforts of modern life, people are more stressed, more anxious, and more disconnected than ever? What if everything you've been taught about happiness is wrong, deeply wrong? What if the price of happiness isn't what society says it is, but something far darker, more insidious that we're all blindly paying? The modern world has become obsessed with happiness, so much so that we're conditioned to believe that any deviation from it is a personal failure. We're sold a dream where happiness is the end result of success, wealth, and social approval. But the reality is different. What if the pursuit of happiness, the very thing that dominates your thoughts and actions, is the trap? What if, by constantly striving for it in the way society tells you to, you're unknowingly digging your own grave of dissatisfaction and emptiness? Pause for a moment and think about this. When was the last time you truly felt at peace? Not because of an achievement or external validation, but simply because you were alive in the present moment. Not for the happiness that's promised, but for the fullness of life itself. How many times have you been told that happiness is something you earn, that it's an achievement, a destination? But then, the deeper you dive into the pursuit, the more you realize, the more you chase it, the further it moves away from you. Here's the unsettling truth, one that's difficult to face. The pursuit of happiness, as it is sold to you, is an illusion. An illusion so ingrained that it governs your every move, your thoughts, your relationships, your choices. You've been conditioned to believe that happiness is something to be earned, but in this pursuit, you are often sacrificing something far more profound, something that can't be bought, borrowed, or achieved. Think about it. Every time you chase after the next promotion, the next vacation, the next moment of recognition, you are acting out a script written by society, written by people you don't even know. You've been sold the idea that happiness comes from external sources, from possessions, from validation, from achieving more. But the deeper you go, the emptier it becomes. The question then arises, if this idea of happiness isn't real, then what is? You might find yourself in a strange internal tug of war. Part of you is rebelling against this idea, claiming that happiness must be out there, just on the horizon, waiting for you. But there's another, quieter part that feels the truth stirring beneath the surface, that perhaps this endless chase is futile, and that true fulfillment lies in an entirely different direction. So, what if happiness doesn't lie in the next promotion, the next house, the next social milestone, or the next relationship? What if the pursuit itself is the problem? Could it be that, in seeking happiness, you're simply chasing after a shadow that flickers just beyond your reach, always vanishing when you get too close? What if the very act of chasing happiness is a distraction, a denial of something far more profound within you? What if, instead of seeking happiness, you should be seeking something deeper, something that's been buried by the relentless noise of society's expectations? In the next section, we'll explore the psychological and philosophical roots of this issue, the forces that have shaped our beliefs about happiness and how they silently control our thoughts and behaviors. But for now, let the question linger. What if, in our desperate pursuit of happiness, we've missed the point entirely? If you've ever found yourself staring into the void, asking, "Is this it? Is this all there is?" you're not alone. In fact, this nagging sense of existential dissatisfaction is as old as humanity itself. Philosophers and psychologists have grappled with this very issue for centuries. Yet despite all the wisdom accumulated, modern society continues to push an idea of happiness that only deepens our discontent. So, why does this happen? And where did this idea of happiness as a goal, a prize to be attained, even come from? To understand the problem, we need to examine two essential elements: the psychological mechanisms that drive our endless chase for happiness and the philosophical roots of our modern misconceptions about fulfillment. The illusion of happiness in modern life. Psychologically, the obsession with happiness is rooted in a powerful and ancient drive, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. For millennia, human beings have been wired to seek out what feels good and avoid what feels bad. This is simply the biology of survival at work. In a primitive sense, pleasure was linked to things that kept us alive: food, shelter, and companionship. Pain, on the other hand, was a signal that something was wrong or that our survival was at risk. In modern society, however, this survival instinct has been hijacked. What once served a practical, life-preserving purpose has morphed into an unending cycle of consumption, validation, and achievement. Instead of simply seeking pleasure and avoiding pain in a healthy, balanced way, we've become addicted to pleasure itself, the kind that can be bought, consumed, or accomplished. Whether it's the next career milestone, a material possession, or the approval of others, these temporary sources of gratification become the new definition of happiness. This brings us to a disturbing psychological paradox. The more we chase these external markers of success, the more we increase our sense of dissatisfaction. You might get that promotion, buy that car, or find that perfect partner. But the happiness these things bring is fleeting. Once the initial high wears off, you're left with the same gnawing emptiness you felt before. The cycle begins again: more goals, more acquisitions, more validation. This cycle is known as the hedonic treadmill. It's a term coined by psychologists to describe the phenomenon where, after achieving something that was supposed to bring happiness, you quickly return to your baseline level of happiness, only now with a greater sense of longing. The new possessions, accomplishments, or status symbols no longer seem to satisfy. Your desires grow, and the treadmill speeds up. You're stuck in a never-ending race, constantly running after the next thing, never reaching a final sense of contentment. But why does this happen? Why is it that, despite the advancements of civilization, we still find ourselves trapped in a cycle of fleeting joy? The philosophical roots of the modern happiness myth. To answer that, we need to look at the deeper philosophical and cultural forces that shape how we view happiness. Let's start with the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a period in history where human reason and individual rights became the focal point of society. Thinkers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau emphasized the power of the individual to shape their own destiny, to control their own happiness through rational thought and self-determination. This marked the birth of the modern notion of the pursuit of happiness. In theory, happiness became something you could actively strive for through effort, choice, and achievement. It was no longer something you simply lived into. It became a goal to be reached. Yet, this new concept of happiness came with a hidden cost. By shifting the focus to external accomplishments, the Enlightenment thinkers unintentionally set the stage for a world where happiness would be tied to material success, individualism, and competition. Happiness was no longer seen as a natural state of being, but as a goal that could be measured, purchased, and achieved. Here, Friedrich Nietzsche's critique of modernity becomes essential. Nietzsche warned that the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason and progress had stripped humanity of deeper, more meaningful values. The pursuit of happiness, in the modern sense, became a hollow ambition, a superficial goal that masked deeper existential concerns. Nietzsche argued that by focusing on external success and pleasure, people would lose sight of their inner self, their true potential. The result? A form of nihilism, a belief that life has no inherent meaning or value, driven by the emptiness of chasing false goals. Nietzsche's prescription for overcoming this nihilism was not to chase happiness, but to embrace the struggle of life itself, to find meaning in the challenges, suffering, and complexities that define human existence. He called this approach the will to power. This was not power over others, but power over the self, mastery over one's desires, fears, and instincts. But in modern society, we don't hear much about Nietzsche's will to power. Instead, we hear about winning, success, and happiness, and this has led to a deep disconnect between what we think will fulfill us and what actually brings lasting contentment. The unconscious forces at play. Now let's dive into a psychological layer that few people ever truly consider: the role of the unconscious mind in the pursuit of happiness. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers on the human psyche, believed that much of what we do and feel is governed by forces we aren't aware of. These unconscious forces include our shadow, the repressed, unacknowledged parts of ourselves that we don't want to confront. In the context of happiness, Jung suggested that our modern obsession with positive emotions and external success is, in part, an attempt to avoid confronting the darker, more uncomfortable aspects of ourselves. Instead of embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the joy and the pain, the light and the shadow, we focus only on the positive and reject the negative. This leads to a state of imbalance where the pursuit of happiness becomes a way of avoiding personal growth, self-awareness, and emotional depth. You might ask, why is this avoidance so damaging? Because, Jung argued, it's only by confronting the shadow, by integrating the darker parts of our psyche, that we can truly experience wholeness. The refusal to acknowledge these parts of ourselves keeps us trapped in superficial cycles of pleasure-seeking, always chasing happiness, but never quite attaining it. To sum up, modern society has sold us a lie, that happiness is something external, something to be earned, achieved, or purchased. This idea is rooted in both philosophical misconceptions about the nature of life and psychological mechanisms that prevent us from addressing the deeper, more complex truths about our existence. The pursuit of happiness, as it is commonly understood, is a distraction, one that keeps us from confronting the true nature of our desires, our fears, and our potential. The question now becomes, how do we break free from this cycle? How do we reclaim control over our happiness and learn to live in a way that is both fulfilling and true to ourselves? In the next section, we will begin to explore these questions, revealing how this unseen trap shapes not only our individual lives, but also the very fabric of society. Now that we've examined the philosophical and psychological roots of the happiness myth, it's time to dive into something far more subtle and insidious: the consequences of living in pursuit of a lie. These consequences, though invisible at first, ripple out into almost every aspect of our personal lives, our society, and even the very way we perceive reality. We've all hit down or heard the phrase, "you are what you think." But what if this is more true than we've ever realized? What if the relentless pursuit of happiness, the constant striving for external validation and material success, has altered not only how we think, but also how we experience life, shaping our identities and our sense of self-worth? The effects are profound, and they stretch far beyond fleeting emotions. They affect our very ability to connect, to find meaning, and to experience authentic fulfillment. Cognitive biases and the mirage of happiness. Let's begin by considering how the pursuit of happiness warps our thinking. We are all subject to various cognitive biases, unconscious patterns of thought that distort our perception of reality. One of the most insidious of these biases is the hedonic adaptation bias, which leads us to believe that external achievements, whether it's a new job, a bigger house, or a more impressive social circle, will bring us lasting happiness. In reality, research shows that after an initial spike in happiness, we quickly return to our baseline emotional state. The brain, like a thermostat, adjusts to new circumstances, rendering that new achievement or acquisition less satisfying over time. Yet, despite knowing this on some level, we continue to chase the mirage, believing that this time will be different. What's worse, we become so invested in the idea of happiness that we distort reality to fit our desires. This is where the confirmation bias comes in. We selectively focus on information that reinforces the idea that happiness is attainable through external means. We idolize celebrities, influencers, and entrepreneurs who appear to have it all: wealth, fame, love, yet we fail to see the cost of their happiness, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the addictions, the broken relationships. By doing so, we trap ourselves in a cycle where our reality becomes distorted, and we live in a constant state of almost there. We're so focused on the next goal, the next acquisition, the next validation, that we forget to question the very foundations of what we're chasing. We may have everything in the traditional sense: success, comfort, material goods, but inside we feel as if we're missing something essential. The neurological underpinnings of the happiness trap. The human brain is wired for pleasure, no doubt. But as with everything, there's a limit to how much pleasure it can handle before it becomes numb. Research in neuroscience reveals that the brain's reward system, particularly the release of dopamine, plays a huge role in the pursuit of happiness. Dopamine, often referred to as the feel-good neurotransmitter, is released when we experience something pleasurable, like receiving a compliment or buying something new. However, the more frequently we trigger this system through external rewards, the less sensitive it becomes over time. This is known as dopamine desensitization. The brain's reward center becomes less responsive, and the initial high from an achievement or possession wears off faster, leading us to seek bigger and more frequent hits. This biochemical feedback loop explains why the pursuit of happiness through material means or external validation is ultimately unsatisfying. The more we chase, the more we need to chase to feel the same satisfaction. This is why so many people who seem to have it all, fame, wealth, success, still feel deeply unfulfilled. In essence, the brain becomes addicted to its own dopamine-driven reward system, and we're trapped in an endless cycle of seeking more to feel good enough. But the more we pursue this cycle, the less satisfying each new hit becomes. This creates a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, a low-grade unhappiness that constantly lingers, no matter how many goals we achieve. The societal cost: isolation and disconnection. The consequences of the happiness myth extend far beyond the individual. In fact, one of the most insidious effects of our collective obsession with happiness is the erosion of authentic human connection. In our society, relationships are increasingly seen as means to an end, tools for attaining happiness rather than ends in themselves. People often approach relationships with the same mindset they apply to material goods. What can I gain from this? What will this relationship do for me? The more we view others as tools for our own happiness, the less genuine and fulfilling our connections become. This transactional approach to relationships leads to isolation, not intimacy. We become so focused on what we can get that we forget the deeper value of human connection, which is found in mutual growth, vulnerability, and shared experience. As a result, we live in a society where loneliness is epidemic, even in the midst of constant social media connectivity. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, argued that modern life has created a crisis of meaning, where individuals feel alienated from both themselves and others. In Sartre's view, happiness is a false idol that distracts us from the deeper, more uncomfortable realities of human existence, namely, the existential fact that we are free and responsible for creating our own meaning. By pursuing happiness as a form of escape, we turn away from the true potential for fulfillment, which often lies in confronting life's inherent chaos, uncertainty, and suffering. Moreover, in a society that equates happiness with success, people who struggle, whether financially, emotionally, or psychologically, are often seen as failures. The stigma of failure amplifies feelings of shame and isolation, further deepening our collective sense of disconnection. We are taught to hide our vulnerabilities, to present a perfect image of success and happiness, and in doing so, we cut ourselves off from the richness of human experience. The moral consequence: the dehumanization of the self. On a more existential level, the relentless pursuit of happiness strips us of our humanity. The ancient philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who believed that human desires were fundamentally insatiable, argued that the constant striving for more, for happiness, is a form of self-inflicted suffering. But the problem doesn't lie in the striving itself, it lies in what that striving costs us. Schopenhauer contended that as we chase fleeting pleasures and momentary satisfactions, we lose touch with what makes us truly human: our ability to accept suffering, our capacity for deep reflection, and our engagement with life's inherent contradictions. In a world obsessed with happiness, we are taught to deny or numb our suffering. but in doing so, we deny the very parts of ourselves that give us depth, meaning, and growth. True human development is not about achieving a permanent state of happiness, but about learning to navigate both the highs and lows of life. To attempt to escape the lows is to diminish our capacity for true self-understanding and compassion. The price of chasing happiness, then, is not merely dissatisfaction. It is the loss of our own authentic selves. It is a denial of our complexity, our contradictions, and our deeper potential. In trying to live a perfect life, free from struggle, pain, and hardship, we inadvertently dehumanize ourselves, becoming mere consumers of happiness rather than creators of a meaningful existence. The consequences of living in pursuit of a lie are far-reaching, impacting not only our individual lives but also the social and moral fabric of society itself. But the question remains, how do we break free from his cycle? How do we stop chasing the mirage of happiness and reclaim a more authentic, meaningful life? In the next section, we will explore how to escape this trap and embrace a radically different approach to living. At this point, the illusion has been exposed. The chase for happiness, driven by external goals, is nothing more than a trap. But understanding the problem is only the beginning. The real question now is, how do you break free from this cycle? How do you liberate yourself from the societal conditioning that insists happiness is something you achieve, something outside yourself, something that can be bought or earned? The answer, disturbingly enough, lies in doing the opposite of everything you've been told. Stop pursuing happiness. Yes, you read that correctly. What if, instead of pursuing happiness, you sought meaning, depth, and self-understanding? What if you focused not on achieving an ideal, externally driven version of happiness, but on cultivating an authentic life, built on your true values and confronting your deepest fears? The radical shift: embrace the fullness of life. The first step in breaking free is an uncomfortable one. Embrace life as it is. Life is not a series of problems to solve or goals to achieve. It is, as the existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus argue, an open canvas, a vast unknown in which we create meaning. Sartre famously declared that existence precedes essence. In simpler terms, you are not born with a predetermined purpose. You create it through your actions, your choices, and your confrontation with the unknown. But this isn't the easy path. It's not the path of constant pleasure-seeking or material success. It's a path that demands you confront the uncomfortable realities of life, including suffering, loss, and uncertainty. The pursuit of happiness, in the way society defines it, is a flight from these realities. But, as Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, so profoundly understood, it is only through confronting suffering head-on that we can find true meaning in life. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl argued that even in the most horrific circumstances, the search for meaning, not happiness, is what sustains the human spirit. To embrace life in its entirety means rejecting the idea that happiness is the ultimate goal and instead accepting the full range of human experience. This means facing your deepest fears, acknowledging your flaws, and becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable. It means finding peace not by avoiding suffering, but by accepting it as an inevitable part of existence. You don't need to strive for perfection. You don't need to be constantly happy. In fact, your greatest strength will come from accepting the messiness of life. When you stop expecting happiness to be constant and instead learn to find contentment in the fleeting moments of beauty, joy, and growth, you start to experience life on a deeper level. The will to power, empowerment through self-mastery. This leads us directly to Friedrich Nietzsche's radical idea, the will to power. Nietzsche didn't mean power in the conventional sense, dominating others or achieving fame, but power over oneself, over your own instincts, desires, and perceptions. He believed that true strength lies in the ability to master your inner world, to rise above the societal expectations and cultural narratives that dictate how you should live and what you should pursue. Nietzsche's philosophy is liberating. It gives you the power to redefine happiness on your own terms. Instead of measuring yourself against external yardsticks like career success, wealth, or social approval, focus on what truly matters to you. What do you value most deeply? What does a life well lived look like for you, not in comparison to others, but in alignment with your own soul? Embracing the will to power is about rejecting the idea that you must conform to the success templates that society hands you. It is about discovering your own path and stepping off the well-worn road of mainstream happiness. This path will not be easy. It will require you to face your fears and deal with your shadow, the parts of yourself that you've been taught to hide or deny. But by doing so, you move closer to a state of true self-empowerment. You stop being a passive participant in your life and become the creator of your own experience. The power of radical authenticity. But how does one go about cultivating this power? The key is radical authenticity. The modern world is obsessed with images, with portraying a life of perfection and happiness. Social media, advertisements, and even our own social circles tell us what we should look like, what we should want, and how we should behave. But what if the most powerful thing you can do is to be radically true to yourself, even when that means going against the grain? What if the freedom you seek is in shedding all the masks you wear for the sake of societal approval and stepping into your raw, unfiltered self? This process of self-discovery requires courage. It demands that you look inward, that you acknowledge your deepest truths, your insecurities, your desires, your wounds, and that you stop running from them. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming the person you are meant to be rather than the person society wants you to be. It is the path of integrating all aspects of your psyche, the light and the shadow, the good and the bad, into a unified whole. When you embrace radical authenticity, you stop looking to others for validation. Instead, you create your own meaning. You stop chasing after happiness because you realize that it is not a goal to be reached. It is a byproduct of living a life that is aligned with your deepest values, passions, and truths. Examples of those who broke free. This process of breaking free from the lie of happiness has been demonstrated throughout history by individuals who refuse to conform to societal expectations. Take, for example, the great philosophers like Socrates, who rejected the idea of living a life of wealth or status in favor of a life of inquiry and self-examination. Socrates was not concerned with conventional success. He was concerned with living authentically and asking the hard questions about what it means to live a meaningful life. Similarly, figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela found meaning not through material success, but through service, sacrifice, and a deep commitment to justice. These individuals were not focused on their own happiness, but on something greater, their sense of purpose, their values, and their duty to others. In more modern contexts, people like Steve Jobs and Marie Curie exemplified a different kind of success, one that was less about societal accolades and more about their unshakable drive to pursue their passions and contribute to humanity. Jobs often spoke of his quest for a life of meaning, not comfort, while Curie's dedication to science came at great personal cost. Neither of them sought happiness through conventional means. They found fulfillment in their work, in their pursuit of truth, and in their service to the world. The path forward, reclaim your power. Breaking free from the lie of happiness requires a paradigm shift. It requires rejecting the idea that happiness is something to be earned or achieved, and instead focusing on living authentically, in alignment with your deepest truths. The happiness myth keeps you trapped in a cycle of external validation, but when you step off that treadmill, you find something far more powerful, your own sense of purpose. So what is the most revolutionary thing you can do? Stop chasing happiness. Instead, focus on living a life that is true to you, one that values authenticity over approval, growth over comfort, and meaning over pleasure. In doing so, you'll discover that happiness was never the goal. It was simply a byproduct of living a life that is fully, unapologetically your own. The journey we've taken together has brought us through a labyrinth of psychological insights, philosophical reflections, and societal critiques. We've dismantled the false idol of happiness, revealed the psychological and neurological traps that keep us locked in its pursuit, and even explored the rebellious act of stepping away from the lie that has defined so much of our existence. But now, it's time for the final, most powerful realization, the insight that ties everything together, the one that changes how you view yourself and the world forever. You see, the real truth isn't just about rejecting the myth of happiness or chasing the endless string of external goals. It's not even about creating meaning out of suffering, as Viktor Frankl so eloquently stated. The most powerful revelation is this: The price of happiness is not just the suffering it causes, it's the loss of your ability to truly live. Let that sink in for a moment. The more you chase the illusion of happiness, the more you diminish your capacity to experience life fully, deeply, and authentically. This isn't just a philosophical statement, it's an existential truth, a realization that shatters the very foundation of modern life. The paradox of fulfillment. You cannot seek it, you must live it. Let's circle back to something we've hinted at but never fully explored. The paradox of fulfillment. The very act of seeking happiness prevents you from finding it. This is not a trivial observation. It's the fundamental flaw in the way we approach our existence. When you pursue happiness as an external goal, you place it outside of yourself. You believe that happiness exists as something to be obtained, something you can buy, achieve, or earn. But fulfillment, true fulfillment, is not a state to be acquired. It is a process to be lived. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this when he spoke of becoming rather than being. Happiness, as we've come to define it, is static. It's a moment frozen in time. But fulfillment is dynamic. It's the ongoing process of living authentically, embracing both the light and the dark, confronting your fears and engaging deeply with life's challenges. In this process, you realize that fulfillment was never about achieving some idealized state of happiness. It was about fully experiencing your existence in all its beauty and pain. This is a fundamental shift in perspective. It's no longer about the pursuit of happiness. It's about engaging with life on your own terms, free from the societal scripts that tell you what you should want. It's about seeing the value in each moment, each decision, each experience, regardless of whether it's happy or unhappy. The liberation, reclaiming your own definition of life. Once you grasp this truth, everything changes. The societal pressure to fit into a mold of success, pleasure, and perpetual happiness begins to lose its hold on you. You stop measuring your life against the external yardstick of what you should have achieved by now. Instead, you create your own standards. Your life is no longer a race to some elusive finish line. It is a journey of deep self-exploration, of continual growth, and of meaningful experiences. This is where true liberation begins, in the act of rejecting the false promises of society and stepping into the raw, unvarnished reality of your own existence. No longer do you need to chase happiness, you simply need to live, to be present, to be authentic, to fully experience what comes your way. What does this look like in practice? It looks like embracing discomfort when it arises, rather than running from it. It looks like pursuing your passions, not because they will make you happy, but because they give your life depth and meaning. It looks like engaging in relationships, not to fill a void or to gain validation, but to share in the beauty of human connection. The deepest truth is this: your life is already complete, exactly as it is. You do not need to chase happiness to feel whole. You are whole right now, in this moment. The power of acceptance, letting go of the need for control. At the heart of this realization lies acceptance. Acceptance of yourself, of life, and of the inherent uncertainties and contradictions of the human experience. This acceptance is not resignation. It is an active choice to stop fighting the flow of life and to begin moving with it, rather than against it. Acceptance is the key that unlocks the door to freedom. It's the ability to let go of your attachment to happiness as an outcome and embrace life as it comes. This doesn't mean you stop striving for growth or meaning. It means you stop demanding that every experience be pleasant or fulfilling in the way that society tells you it should be. When you stop needing to control everything, you open yourself to the possibility of something far richer than happiness, peace, clarity, and the depth that comes from living authentically. A life redefined, a new lens on existence. Now you might be wondering, if happiness isn't the goal, what is? What should you strive for, if not the transient highs of pleasure or success? The answer is profound, yet simple: self-realization. Self-realization, as defined by the great philosophers, is the process of discovering who you truly are, beyond the roles, labels, and expectations imposed by society. It is the act of becoming deeply attuned to your inner world, of facing your shadow, and integrating all aspects of your being into a cohesive whole. In this process, you stop seeing yourself as someone to be fixed, improved, or validated. Instead, you see yourself as a work of art, constantly evolving, always in the process of becoming. This journey of self-realization is, in itself, an act of fulfillment. It is not about achieving a particular state of happiness. It is about engaging in the ongoing dance of self-discovery, self-expression, and self-acceptance. It is about finding beauty in your flaws and wisdom in your struggles. It is about embracing life in its entirety, without the need to chase after some idealized version of joy. When you let go of the need to control your happiness, you open yourself to a more profound kind of living. One where each moment is enough, and the pursuit of fulfillment is no longer a race, but a journey to be experienced fully and without regret. The final reflection: what comes next? So, where does that leave us? If happiness is not the goal, and fulfillment is a process rather than an outcome, what is left to pursue? The answer is simple but radical: your own truth. Your truth is not something to be found in the pursuit of happiness, but in the acceptance of yourself as you are, and the courage to live authentically in a world that often values appearances over substance. It is in the freedom to experience life on your terms, to reject the false scripts imposed by society, and to choose meaning over mere pleasure. The ultimate truth is this: life is not about seeking happiness, it's about embracing the full spectrum of experience, allowing yourself to grow through discomfort, and living a life that is true to your deepest essence. And in doing so, you may find that happiness, in its most authentic form, comes not as a goal, but as a natural byproduct of a life well lived. And with that, we come full circle. You are now equipped with the knowledge, the insights, and the tools to break free from the myth of happiness and step into a life of true meaning and self-realization. The journey is yours to continue, and while the road may be uncertain, the truth you carry with you will guide you through the darkness and into the light of a life that is authentically yours.